Well, welcome to this episode of Beyond the Known World. And this episode is about UK time slips. So just 1 second and we'll get to the first story.
Penrith, Cumbria. Angela reported a strange experience as she walked on a steep path between pine trees up to the top of Beacon Hill that overlooks Penrith. At the time, she was a teenager. Angela would often climb the beacon when she wasn't at school, and it's still a popular local walk. One hot day in August in the mid-1970s, Angela and a friend set out onto the footpath from Beacon Edge. The walk takes about 15 minutes, and the path has many abrupt angles as it zigzags through the trees. The trees crowd thickly round the track as it climbs over craggy sandstone outcrops. Soon you feel quite apart from the everyday world. It's an odd feeling, and you can have the impression that someone is watching you from the woods on either side. You go up and up, changing direction, and losing sight of the path below and behind you.
Just 1 second.
As Angela and her friend climbed that day, they chatted away, but Angela reports how the atmosphere grew increasingly heavy, as if there was thunder in the air. They'd walked up many times and weren't taking much notice of their surroundings until they turned a corner and stopped. They both saw it, an old-fashioned cottage, roughly made of stone. Angela says that it was like a dwelling from the Middle Ages. The trouble was there had never been a cottage there before. Smoke was coming from the chimney, so someone was at home. Angela says that there was a very uncanny feeling about the place. She looked at her friend and, as the door began to open, they both fled.
Just 1 second. Just 1 second.
When she worked up the courage to climb the hill some months later, the cottage wasn't there. Her friend would never talk about the experience. As you would imagine, in the years since, I've taken 1 or 2 walks up that path, in the snow and the sun, but I've never had the slightest inkling of a time anomaly.
Wow, well there you go. That's the first story of this episode of Beyond the Known World. Just 1 second and the next story is coming up. Right, well, here we are on Beyond the Known World. This is story 2, Pembroke, Wales. And just 1 second, and we will get to it. Just 1 second.
Pembroke, Wales. Over the next few years, I taught an evening class on ghosts and legends for adults. I told the story of Angela Charlton, and one man, Roger, who I happened to know from outside the class, told me his tale. Roger said that he and his family had visited Pembroke Castle in Wales. They were climbing the tower, and he was a flight or 2 above his family. When he reached the top of the castle tower, he glanced out over the river and saw it was full of medieval boats. He thought there must be some kind of festival on, but when he remarked on it, not only had his family not noticed it, but when they went out to look at the river, there were no boats. Roger had no explanation for this and didn't make a big deal of it. He probably wouldn't have mentioned it at all if I hadn't told him the story about the girls climbing the hill in Penrith.
Well, what can you say about that? Stay tuned for story 3. Right, well here's episode story 3 here on Beyond the Known World UK time slips. Just 1 second and we'll get to it. Here we go.
An adventure. One of the most famous accounts of a time slip is reported in a book called An Adventure. An Adventure was initially published in 1910 and gives the accounts of 2 English women who experienced a time slip in the gardens of the Palace of Versailles on August 10, 1901. They wrote the book under pseudonyms Elizabeth Morrison and Frances Lamont, though their actual names were Charlotte Moberly, 1846 to 1937, and Eleanor Jourdain, 1863 to 1924. Moberly's father was headmaster at the prestigious Winchester School and later Bishop of Salisbury. In her account, she distances herself from a belief in ghosts and the occult. An epidemic of spiritualism was sweeping Britain and America at that time. Jourdain's father was a vicar of the Church of England. They felt they had walked through the gardens as they were on August 10, 1792, the day the French monarchy fell during the French Revolution. This account is remarkable for the detail of the statements of the two women, and the efforts they went to establish the historical evidence for their belief that they had strayed into the past. The two women met 3 months after they visited Versailles and talked it over again. It was at this time that they discovered that Jourdain had not seen the lady, and that Miss Moberly had not seen the plough, cottage, woman, or girl. Because of this they went apart and wrote separate accounts without conferring. This fact strongly suggests to me that they were not making up their experience. Miss Lamont, in her story, used the words uncanny and eerie to describe her feelings, but at the time she denied any thought that any of the people or places encountered were unreal or ghostly.
Wow! Hey, wow! Well, that's this episode of Beyond the Known World over. Hope you've enjoyed it, and hope you look forward to the next episode here on my channel, James Higgins Open World, and this episode of Beyond the Known World. Thank you.